My session chairman, Shri C.R. Prasad ji, my colleagues, panelists here, Shri Suresh Mathur ji, Rajiv ji, I see some senior people here, Razdan Sahab, Dr. Avinash Chandra, Dr. Garg, and delegates and the young participants. Very good afternoon. Okay. So before I have a small presentation, I like to run through that and I like to give you a flavor of what all is happening in LNG in the world. My colleagues, panelists would have spoken and would speak on the issues pertaining to India. I'll touch upon some of the issues, some of the main characters, salient features, what's all happening in the LNG field in the world. I think that will give you a flavor. But first of all, you must understand that India is a large country. We have a huge population. We need to meet the energy requirements of our people. So since we do not have that much production of our own, we import oil to the extent of about 80–82%. We also import gas. Now, gas cannot be imported as such, cannot be transported through pipelines a long way from different countries, and we import from those countries which have huge reserves of gas. So the gas is liquefied there, and that's why it is known as liquefied natural gas, LNG. It is cooled to a temperature of about minus 160, 161, which is very cold. So therefore, the technology is different. Where it is stored, that metallurgy equipment are different. The way it is transported normally by the ships are built differently. Normal metals would get brittle at that temperature, so therefore it's a new technology, different technology. And then it is brought to the importing country's place where it is offloaded, kept at a place, and then it is regasified. Regasified with the rate that is required for the consumers and supplied through the pipeline. So that's the LNG business, scenario on this. Now, India imports about 50% of its requirement as LNG, as gas here. And therefore, you must understand that when we buy something, there are various ways of buying it. You may require short-term requirement, you may have long-term requirement, so contracting is a big issue. How do you rate that? Because gas is a cleaner fuel, is a better fuel in many ways, but replaces crude oil and other products. Therefore, there has to be some price parity. So that's a very complex issue that must be kept in mind, that when you're buying that as any energy source, any energy, it has to have parity with similar sources which it can replace. So therefore, normal LNG is bought, which is a larger quantity of LNG is bought, which is linked to crude oil. As the crude oil prices vary, LNG prices can also vary. So therefore, the challenge is how to minimize these variations. So a whole lot of work has been done. Companies have devised several types of contracts. There is a good amount of LNG that is now coming up which is not linked to crude oil. So there the contracting is different, so their pricing mechanisms are different. So these are the complexity of the natural gas that you buy, and one should be conscious of that how it is done. Also, when you are liquefying it, it's a huge investment countries are making. Those investments are built into the price of the LNG. Importers which import LNG also have to build in very advanced infrastructure to store it, to regasify it, and also to see that all equipment that is needed, that no gas is lost as a vapor, it is recondensed and captured and then used. So all that cost of the plants, regasification plants. So we have liquefaction and we have, for the importers, the regasification, storage and regasification plants. So we bring in, store and regasify. All that cost also goes on to the LNG price. And then it is the pipeline. So tankline transportation, that cost also comes till the gas reaches the customer. So there are many things, and I'm not talking about the taxation. There are a number of taxes that come and apply on that, different kind of things. So the customer actually pays built-in cost, right from the liquefaction cost, the transportation cost, the storage regasification cost, again the transportation cost within the country, and the taxes. And then he should be conscious, therefore, that whether it is cost effective to use gas, or is there any other alternative, equally good alternative there or not. So that's the background. I think for the younger generation, younger people here, you must keep in mind that when you are contracting gas or buying gas, what are the parameters that you need to do, and which are the countries which are bestowed with huge reserves. So I'll just quickly run through to give a flavor, and maybe we can have time for asking this thing. So I'll touch upon the current LNG scenario worldwide, global, the LNG demand forecast, some of the things, how you make investments on some projections that this is likely demand. So if I have good gas reserves, I will set up a liquefaction considering that I can sell it or a profitable way over a long period of time, and such investments are made for 30 years, 40 years. So you need to be conscious of that. How the contracts are there, what are the emerging trends, and maybe something on pricing. So I'll just run through that. So very brief on this thing, worldwide about 290 million tons is kind of traded. This is about 10% increase than the previous year. I'm talking about 217 data. Qatar is presently the biggest exporter of gas. It has huge reserves there actually. There are other countries also who have huge reserves. For example, Iran perhaps has more than Qatar, but right now there's an embargo. It can't really liquefy and sell that. Russia also has a huge reserves, but then that supply is through pipeline, not through the LNG route. So there are reasons for that. Of the total gas, 27% is sold by Qatar itself. Qatar, Australia, and now emerging US are the three major countries that would perhaps rule in the next decade or so. Now, there are about 121 LNG regasification terminals that import gas in 40 countries. So 40 countries import gas on this. From the supply side, there are 101 liquefaction trains. Trains means that at one place you can have a economically, technically sound plant which is very efficient, can be of 2.5 million ton, 5 million ton, 7.5 million ton, and you can have multiple trains depending upon how much you have the option and perhaps the capacity to liquefy. And there are 19 countries as of now which export. Shipping, you cannot ship and buy gas unless you have ships which are capable of carrying LNG. So it's very important. It is very much integral part of the LNG business. So right now there are about 511 vessels, and there are some floating systems. I'll touch upon what is an FSRU. FSRU is a floating system, a floating terminal which can store and regasify on a ship rather than on land. So there are certain business models which are favoring for FSRUs, floating systems. Many countries are now adopting, and this is an emerging area within the LNG regasification. The top 10 LNG exporters, we have said that Qatar is the maximum, Australia, Malaysia, Nigeria, Indonesia, they are the major countries which are some of the countries are now, their gas reserves are depleting, and some more countries are coming up here. So you will see in next 5-7 years time, some kind of changes happening here. When it comes to importers, India stands at number 4, major importer, as Mr. Prasad spoke about it, and Mr. Mathur also. And we see a significant growth in our imports. This year we might be importing about 23 million tons. But then China has very quickly actually ramped up their gas, and they've used all kinds of methods to get gas into the country. A lot of pipelines from East European countries, from Russia, as also a number of regasification and storage terminals have come on the coastal part here, about a dozen of them, very, very quickly. So India occupies a pretty good place as far as the major importers are concerned. If you see the worldwide regasification import terminals, these are the positions that they are there. About 121 terminals, floating terminals here are 22, and these 22 regasify about 12 to 13% of the LNG, total LNG that is regasified in the world. Total receiving capacity is about 851 million tons per annum, but the general capacity utilization is just about 35% there. There are many terminals which are not being properly, appropriately used, but very strikingly different. The Dahej terminal here of Petronet is actually operating over 100% capacity. It's perhaps one of the biggest terminal operating at single place for that. This is a remarkable achievement of Petronet. Yeah, FSRU is floating storage and regasification unit. It's a ship where you can store and regasify. Slowly, for certain business models in certain countries, certain projects, sites, location, this is a favored solution, because you can get the ship built somewhere at FSRU and bring in and moor it there, have the pipeline, and today the technology makes it easier. You can have normal pipelines, you can have flexible pipelines as well. So it's a quicker. Floating systems can be perhaps made operational in just about less than 2 years' time, while a land-based terminal may take about 3.5 years. Liquefaction capacity, as I said, that Australia and Qatar are the leaders there, and in number of projects that are coming up, if you see some of the planned liquefaction that is there, some of the projects that are approved in the US and Australia, you're adding about 140 million ton capacity maybe in next 1 or 2 years' time. But the problem and because the challenge in setting up a liquefaction plant is the financial decision, FID. There are several challenges there. So not that you hear announcement that this plant liquefaction is being set up, unless the financial closure is there, you have no definite timeline or a schedule for operation of that. And there are several projects which are stalled or delayed on several accounts actually. When it comes to LNG demand, the major consumer in the world is the Asia, which consumes about practically 2/3 of the LNG. So that's the driving, source for LNG growth in the world, if you see. And amongst the Asia, I think China and India principally are the major consumers. Japan is the biggest importer. They import about 84 million ton per annum, but they are now stabilizing. They are plateauing at their levels now. Same is happening in South Korea, same is happening in Taiwan now, but China and India are steadily growing, and it is perhaps believed that Indian growth will pick up maybe faster in coming time. But there are some new importer countries here like Thailand, you have Philippines also coming up there, you have Bangladesh very recently joined that, and Pakistan. We must actually give credit to Pakistan that within a year and a half, they put up 2 FSRU projects. This is a remarkable feat. We couldn't do in India. We have been talking for a long time. Whatever is this. Bangladesh also has now a floating system unit operating in the country. So I think that they are very smaller countries are taking lead now in innovating new innovative ways, business models to really operate, and Pakistan certainly is a case study. By regions, if you say, same thing here, like Asia would be the major importing region and drives the LNG requirement. Forecast-wise, again, it is the China, India. If you see the new countries on the other side, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, even countries like Malaysia and Indonesia have gone for a regas terminal actually, because they have contracted all their gas, which they can't change. But for their internal consumption and all, they have developed this flexibility to get some gas from even from outside. Very, very different thinking actually. Also, Razdan Sahab, I'd like to point out here that the domestic price in Indonesia is something similar that we have here situation, is a major exporter, but their export price and the domestic gas price are different. And not that it is highly subsidized, it is more or less at a market driven price there. So that makes it very sustainable kind of a model. If you see what's happening now, while the growth up to the yellow margin, if you see, these are the projects that are under construction, but the demand wise, if you see the gray color, is going to grow pretty large. So over a period of time, if you see, the growth is expected to be very high. And the normal gestation period, as I said, for a normal liquefaction would be around 4 years time, minimum 4 to 5 years time. So there are projects which are coming up in the investment being made in the years, but we find that in the last couple of years the investment has actually come down dramatically. This would mean not many liquefaction plants would come in that given time frame. That means stagnancy in the availability of liquefaction capacity, that is LNG availability on that. So this is a worry that there is a kind of a slowdown there, and people are analyzing, analysts are trying to work out that what would be the impact on the overall availability of the LNG in the world. Something on the demand scenario, I would say that I think I'll skip this. Like only one point, that no new country has joined in LNG producing community in 2017. No new plant has come. Although there were announcements, but there were no FIDs, there were no construction, there was no commissioning there. So that's a kind of a worry here. We have already touched this. Bangladesh has the FSRU operating in Maheshkhali port. India we have been talking about. There was of course a proposal to have the floating system at Jaigarh. FSRU did come there, but then I don't know, there is no definite timeline when this will be operating. Egypt has again become an exporter. You know, it was an exporting country, but then its own reserves went down, its demand has gone up. So instead of exporting, it started using its own gas now, but now it has found more reserves, and then it's again a exporter now. But overall, the expectation is that the global markets will remain oversupplied for next 4 to 5 years time, with projects in USA and Australia to commence production. Australia, it is likely, although Qatar has announced that second wave of expansion from 77 to about 110, but Australian projects might overtake and may lead Qatar slightly higher on the same. And the number of projects that are planned and proposed in US also would make it perhaps almost close to the same level. So these three countries, to my mind, in next 5 to 7 years time would rule the LNG supply in the world. A little bit on how the contracts are done. What is happening in the contract? Because we want to buy and have a good contract, low variation in the pricing and supply as per my needs. Petronet, for example, had signed a contract for 25 years. So Qatar and Petronet are bound by 25 years supply contract of a definite quantity. They've got similar contract, a little lesser duration with ExxonMobil from Australia. They have also another contract with Qatar now for definite quantity each year, how much will be supplied, and a duration fixed now. But then how over the last 10 years, 15 years, the nature of contracts is changing. Both the buyers and sellers are finding it difficult to hold on the older premises of contracting. So what is changing? Increased portfolio supplies. That means earlier it was like Qatar started, the entire one train production came to Petronet. So they were assured for 25 years they will have a train or two trains supplying to one project in Dahej to India. Now this is not happening. They will perhaps have a 30–40% supply and rest would be a portfolio. So they'll keep this thing. So it's not just unless the project full capacity is guaranteed for offtake, this is changing. Duration of the contract is shortening. It is now about 10 years. Long term means 10 years. Earlier it used to mean 20 years and above. Pricing structure, as I said, normally LNG was linked to crude oil price, and crude oil price benchmarks are different. So you need to choose which one. Also in US, the benchmark was their normal indices like Henry Hub, or there are a number of hubs there that are used as a benchmark, which is not linked to crude oil. So there are today options where you can use a crude oil linked or a hybrid or a purely US Henry Hub, this thing. One has to use and take an analysis that on a long term, which one would be a good contract for them, a simple one or a hybrid one. Then you are not permitted that the gas, like in Petronet, the cargo, where you say the ship coming, bringing gas, could not be diverted anywhere else in another country. But today those flexibilities are coming up there. It used to be a take or pay. The gas, you have bought this thing, I am supplying you. If you don't take it, even then you have to pay. And one cargo of that size of 150,000 cubic meters, maybe around 60,000 tons or so, would cost about 25 to 30 million US dollars. It's a huge commitment. And there could be situations where you said, I can't take it now. So how do you come out of this situation? So present day contracts have built in a lot of flexibilities like liquidated damages and all, and have moved away from take on pay. So there are several significant changes. So just given this thing, average contract length, earlier it used to be about 20, it has come to about 8 years. Also, like Petronet had 7.5 million ton contract, today the contracts are of a smaller volume. Both the sellers and buyers are little hesitant to commit for larger quantities, for larger durations, longer durations also. So the normal contracts are about just about 0.5, 0.6 million tons and not very large quantities. So these are things are changing in commercial terms there. I'll touch just about few emerging trends, and I think at that point in time we can have perhaps time for question answers there. Now LNG markets would remain oversupplied, so there is good thing for India that you have choices of sources, you can negotiate better now, you have infrastructure built in. So for next couple of years time where you are linked to crude oil prices are also low relatively compared to others, other time, you know. So it's a good chance and good opportunity for India. The projected crude price are supposed to be, several predictions have said that it may range between $60 to $80, which is tolerable. Unlike we had $120, $130 a barrel, were very high, and we had to pay very high price for that. New land-based terminals, FSRUs, and the new markets in Asia will drive the demand, definitely. More projects are coming, and Asian countries are actually using it. One of the indicators of that the market is maturing is that, as I said, portfolio LNG is available. So out of the total LNG that is traded, about 27–28% of that is available on spot. Spot means you just want to buy one cargo. I have normal contract, but I find I need little more this thing beyond the contract. What can I do? I can't change the contract much. So I can go to the market and say, I want to buy one cargo if some supplier is there, and we can use this for your own business on that. So this kind of availability of spots has increased and given us both the producers and the consumers a lot of flexibility in this. So just shown that the spots, and the spots also have come predominantly from these three countries, you know, the US, the Australia and the Qatar. Major producers also have more liquidity actually there. So I think increasing availability of volumes is good for India, are from US, Australia, Russia and Africa. Africa, where Indian companies are partners in that big project offshore of Mozambique, can be one of the big projects which the LNG can come to India. New buyers are coming up, Singapore, Thailand, Mexico, Pakistan, and a lot of increase in the capacity is happening in India and as also China. We also have some projects proposed to be a floating system based here. There are no more indices are coming up where we can benchmark the pricing, and there is a lot of talk about having an India specific index as well, and I think a lot of efforts are going on this thing, maybe in some time to come, and there are some prerequisites for that. I think we need to perhaps work on that, and but that will be a good thing on that. Europe, the demand is declining because they have a lot of pipeline gas there. So it is a pipeline gas competition. Availability is also pricing versus LNG there. It's a unique kind of a situation there. I think I'll stop here. There are many things that we can share, but I thought the general things that get a flavor of what's all happening worldwide in LNG, and India cannot be isolated from those changes. And I strongly feel that when India can buy crude oil at international prices, why can't it buy LNG also at the same internationally traded prices on a better terms contract conditions that suit India on this? And I think the kind of requirement you saw, Mr. Prasad pointed out, Mr. Suresh Mathur pointed out, our gas contribution into the primary energy mix is very low. And I think this government, I'm critical of that because none other than the Prime Minister had said that let us move to the gas-based economy. But we see hardly any incentive, anything has come up in promoting gas usage in the country. On the contrary, some of the taxation has made landed price of the gas at the consumer end little costlier only. But I think it is the time when the government has realized, and I think we hope that several new initiatives will be taken which will promote cleaner, better fuel. Price-wise also, LNG is better at any crude oil price. It is cheaper than any crude oil price. Since it is linked to crude oil, it is cheaper, it is cleaner. It makes sense, therefore, to switch to a gas-based economy. Thank you very much.